And anybody who's an AE and wants to transition into sales management, highly recommend it. And he talks about these quadrants of, like, if I remember correctly, it was like the known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown unknowns. And basically the idea is that you're going from something you really know well, and you're going into kind of a quadrant where there's a lot of unknown, and you don't know these unknowns. So they're not like known unknowns. There's like an expert level where you're like, okay, I know what I don't know. But when you go from an AE to a sales manager, there's a heck of a lot of unknown unknowns. Stuff that can hit you over the head from the back, and you can get quickly fired and lose your job. Because there are many mistakes you end up making. For example, I'm kind of thinking on the fly. You're very good at a number of things in the selling process. Maybe it's discovery and qualification and yada, 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 and including closing. You ask a great closing question, and you're good to go. So now you're a sales manager and you're a rep, and you have a team of, let's say, 10 sales reps, and a number of them are not doing great. So the first kind of knee-jerk reaction is like, all right, I'm going to start helping them close deals and like sell on their behalf. That's a big bad mistake. And maybe in the short term it's okay, but you're jumping instantly to what you're most comfortable with, which is doing sales. But the role of a sales manager is not to continue selling, it's to lead your team to become effective at selling without you interjecting and overly involved, right? So you're starting to go to what you're most comfortable, which is selling, and you're not actually coaching or leading your team to be independent of you to a large degree. The other big unknown is like you think that the skill that was good for you is the one that's good for every one of your rep, but everyone can sell slightly differently. They have different strengths, different weaknesses. So again, like your first knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, darn, I was really good at this. This is exactly how we're going to sell. It's another big mistake. And then there's an array of all these mistakes that really can get you into a lot of trouble because your team starts failing. You start falling behind, and then you don't hit your quota, Q1, Q2, and then you're fired. So long story short, going from an AE to a sales manager is a big jump. And it's something you have to be extremely careful about. And my recommendation to a lot of AEs is start preparing for this in advance. And pick up that book, The Accidental Sales Manager. I think it'll illuminate a lot of these like problems, that minefield that you should kind of map out and avoid.
Now let's move a little bit from getting into sales management to what about when you've just bagged your first VP of sales job? Here's what my experience has been. People who are in a sales management job who want to move to a VP of sales job,
yeah,
they always think that they're ready for it. They don't think that it's like any different whatsoever. And then they get in the role and they're like, holy fuck, this is way different. I didn't realize I had all this stuff. Share with everybody, like, what are some of the surprises? Like, what should you expect when you're in that first sales VP role? And kind of prep everybody a little bit.
Yeah, great question. There's just so much. So where do I start? Well, first of all, I want to kind of lay out the 4 key roles of a VP of sales. And I mentioned this in in one of our chats at some point, or maybe that was one of the events you did with Amy, and I posted that. But it's actually 4 roles, and they're all fairly complicated. So one of them is you're a people manager, right? So first thing you think of VP of sales, because the word sales is in the title, you kind of end up ignoring the actual role and separating it from the title. Yes, the title is VP of sales, but there are 4 key components of the role. One is people manager. And oh, by the way, that's a very tough role. It's a very tough job to manage people. we mentioned this earlier, is that a lot of the problems in an organization can be boiled down, I would say like 90% of any big problems, to people problems, right? And this will be like a theme as we talk about, if we get to a point of recruiting, building winning teams, and making sure that you hire people that are good, and not just good for their skills and their traits and capabilities, but good fit into the chemistry of the team, which is a whole different category a lot of people don't think about. But you want to make sure you're a good people manager, and you're building successful teams and you're leading them well. Another topic is leadership. That's part of being a people manager, which is a very, very important skill set that, to your question, going into a VP of sales job, you're like, holy smokes, this is way more than I expected. Well, leadership is hard. Managing people is hard. And if we talk about leadership, one thing I will say is that don't think of leadership as that qualitative, fluffy, squishy thing that the self-proclaimed experts talk about on their blogs and LinkedIn. It's actually an extremely objectively, tangibly, rigidly important skill set that's very hard. And we should talk about it too if we get a chance, because if you're not a good leader, it's going to be very hard to be a successful or long-standing successful sales executive. So that's the first job, people manager, leader. Second one is customer manager. Ultimately, you have to sell the way that customers want to buy. And being able to understand your customers and provide an exceptional customer experience through your sales team, it's an important role. Let me give you a tactical example and then jump to the last two roles of a sales VP. For example, has anybody ever clicked on a get a demo call to action on a website? Get a demo, request a demo.
Yeah.
And then, right? We all have. And then you get an email from an SDR that says verbatim, like, before we do a demo, we'd like to do a discovery call first. And you're like, but I didn't click on a request discovery.
Yeah.
Or get discovered.
I'm usually like, do you want my money or not? I'm trying to pay you.
No, but like, I want to see a demo. And as a prospective customer, the journey that's starting to take place is extremely friction based. It's like, I don't want to be discovered. But as a sales leader, you need your sales team to perform a function of discovery. That's critical. Because if you're starting to sell to a person that is not the right fit for you and you're not a right fit for them, it's not like a win-win. Wrong size of an account. Maybe you're selling to enterprises and this is a very small company. Or maybe you're offering a solution that they don't exactly need. Then you are not engaging in what's called high probability selling, which is, by the way, another great book from ages ago. You don't necessarily need to buy it, but there's a lot of themes of modern selling is about focusing on high probability opportunities and disqualifying as quickly as possible the ones that are not. But I'm digressing. The point is this: being a good customer manager, executing that role well as a VP of sales is very important, because if you don't coach your sales team on providing an exceptional frictionless experience for the prospective buyers, you are really just reducing your probability of winning that sale. And that customer experience is an incredible differentiation, because a lot of companies, they really fail at that. A lot of reps, they put you through this discovery that I prefer to call interrogation. They're not great at it. And I don't blame the sales reps, by the way. I blame the sales managers who manage those reps and don't coach them correctly. And the customer journey starts what I call CX, customer experience, or buyer's journey, buyer's experience, BX. It becomes very friction based and not good. So let's go back to the role. So the third role is business manager. Look, I mean, as a VP of sales, you own P&L, right? Profit and loss. You're hiring people, you have a budget, you're producing revenue, you have full P&L responsibility, and you got to manage the business correctly. You are kind of the CEO of the sales team. And you got to make sure you're not overspending the budget, you're investing time effectively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the fourth role is sales manager. You're a VP of sales, you got to manage sales. But the point is that you're a people manager, slash leader, customer manager, business manager, sales manager. There are 4 roles. It's a complex job. So rewinding back, Scott, to your question, like, what is the aha moment? Oh my God. Yeah, it's very complicated. And then when you drill into, for example, being a sales manager, but specifically a VP of sales, which is way more than a frontline sales manager, there's so much you need to understand to effectively execute your job. Of course, it depends on the spectrum of how big the company is. If it's a small startup, it's less complex. But listen, you have to understand things like sales strategy, org structure. Org structure doesn't mean just like I'm going to hire a bunch of AEs and a bunch of SDRs. The question can become, what kind of SDRs? Is it outbound SDRs or inbound SDRs? And why? And if it's AEs and SDRs, then people start asking questions. Well, the CEO and the board ask you, well, how big should the team be? And what's the ratio of SDRs to AEs? And a lot of people are like, oh, like we have 1-to-1. Well, I would argue in a lot of cases that's actually completely wrong. And I can prove it in Excel. And it has nothing to do with it. And but you should be smart enough to know also that it's not a ratio of how many SDRs to AEs. It has nothing to do with that, actually. When you drill deeper, it's all about how many opportunities an AE needs to have and how many an SDR can provide. And you got to build the capacity to provide those meetings / convert it to opportunities in the pipeline to feed your account executives. But so I'm going deeper into specific things in order to highlight and illuminate the fact that you see the complexity that begins to happen. Then you got to understand things like pipeline management. You got to understand sort of the differences between a pipeline review and a forecasting meeting, because they are different. And if you squish them together, what will happen and what you're not focusing on. You got to understand how to effectively coach your sales team. There are a lot of people talking about coaching, but when they start describing what they're really doing, it's more like training. And when you become a VP of sales as an AE, you probably didn't have a good VP of sales in the first place. By the way, I'm not trying to be negative, but that's frequent, Scott. I think you'll agree, which is why you advise and consult a lot of companies on doing things the right way. But you don't have the mentor who has coached you for years to do things correctly. What else? You got to understand how to build a sales production model and a capacity model in Excel. And guess what? The sales VP who thinks who can...
Wait.
Yeah.
In Excel, by the way.
In Excel.
So little did you know, if you're in sales right now or in sales leadership, you need a fucking master's degree in Excel, by the way. This was like
100% true.
this was like a mind-blowing moment for me years ago. It was like, wait a second, I need to understand computers? What are you talking about? We call it Excel hell in my world.
So it's so important because a lot of VPs of sales, I know, they rely on the sales operations team. And that's such a huge mistake. I mean, sales ops is critical, but you own your strategy. You own making the number, hitting the quota, managing the team, making sure your reps are successful, because it's not just about you. In fact, Scott, you said it well on one of the podcasts, on the sales leadership podcast, how you talk, and I have it right in front of me because I wrote it out. It's you said, in terms of executive engagement as a sales leader, how can I help you, right? And it's basically stepping outside of your own world as a VP of sales and realizing it's not about you, it's about the reps. You got to help the reps be successful. Their job is on the line if you screw something up. And that's your words, Scott, from the Sales Leadership Podcast, I think, with Rob Jepson. Yeah. And that's when I, heard you the first time, like, I think it was like last year plus. And I was like, you and I think alike. But the point is that you're going to give what? Your sales plan and all the thinking and rumination and all the drivers that you need to put in your head, download and kind of noodle on and process. You're going to give that over to someone in sales ops. But you're responsible, and you're responsible for the jobs of a lot of people on your team who have to feed families. So as a sales VP, you have to start first in a spreadsheet and do your own thinking. So that is another surprise for a lot of folks who become a sales VP. And there's so much more. And like, what about building winning teams? There's a whole science to that, right? Like, um, there's a tremendous depth to correctly recruiting. And recruiting is unfortunately too bad. Amy Volas is not here, but she'd enjoy this conversation, of course. But recruiting is done so poorly. And again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm actually quoting Google. So Google had this research done at their company. There's actually a book about it, and you can Google it on Google. You can Google it on Google about Google recruiting and the research they identified. And there were some extremely interesting insights where Google did a lot of data analysis and research on how they were recruiting people. And an incredible outcome of that research at Google, this is actually Business Insider, I think, wrote a lot about it, was that a lot of the managers at Google and recruiters who said, I have this amazing set of questions I have like this secret sauce to sniff out talent. And Google realized through data research, again, this is like on Business Insider, on Inc. Magazine, Wall Street Journal. This is not just me like saying this. They realized that it's total garbage. There was no correlation between people who were saying I can sniff out talent and their magical questions that they thought they had, and the actual data showing the performance of these people as it correlates and sources back to the questions that were asked. So, but there's a right way to recruit people. And a lot of sales VPs don't have that training. They haven't studied enough, or a lot of them didn't have the mentorship of how to recruit correctly. They don't convert their recruiting process into a scientific process. And you can. It's called scorecards. And there are some smart questions you can be asking and some that are not so smart, right? And again, I'm going too deep in digressing, but I'm just giving you a big picture of the complexities of the job.
Zorian, I have to ask. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Did you ever go back and reconcile, like when you did interviews, oh, this person liked this candidate, gave them a 10, and then, reconcile it with the performance of those candidates and say, hey, this person's not invited to the interviews anymore.
Oh,
or this person,
100,000,000% on my end. Yes.
Yes, here as well. So, in fact, I used to do it in a more basic kind of way before because I thought a lot about what I want to hire for. And then I improved that game of figuring out what worked and what doesn't. And it's actually more complex because it's not just a question, but it is a scorecard. It's a scorecard. And over the years, I've perfected it. I actually broke it down into 3 specific themes. The first one is personal traits and characteristics. And actually, as Chris Little says in his book, The Accidental Sales Manager, and I was actually referencing it the other day for someone, so I remember this. He said, hire for traits and train for skills. So I actually don't hire for skills the way that most people do. I don't hire for industry experience the way a lot of companies do. They think industry experience is important. It's really not that big of a deal. If you're hiring smart people, yeah, they can learn about your industry. Like they can talk to some customers, the sales team and the data sheets that they can read online, and they know.
It's crazy how many people are still optimizing for industry experience versus sales acumen.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Totally.
I have people ask me that question every single day in my consulting practice. I'm just like, what? Nobody knows about the title insurance industry. Okay, nobody knows about associations. Nobody. No, I have a client who's in like waste management, and literally they build software for companies that deal with porta potties. They're just literally moving shit for a living. And
it's a very profitable business.
Yeah, but they're asking me about like industry experience. And I'm like, are you joking? No one has this particular experience, okay? No one.
Doesn't matter.
I got a good question here, Zorian, for you from Alexine. She typed it in a little bit ago. I want her to get a chance to ask her question.
Yep.
Hi, Zorian. Nice to meet you.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. I'm still doing my cold emails tonight. So,
Good for
like,
you.
yeah,
Respect.
yeah, one of those AEs. But so my question, I actually have only been in a leadership role once. I took over an SDR team basically overnight, and I had 11 direct reports. So it was like a big swing from going from individual
Wow.
contributor to 11. And one
Jeez.
of the things, I don't know if this is just me, but I'm curious your take on this. One of the things I struggled a lot with was honestly empathy. And I think I had kind of this really low level of empathy because I was so used to hitting my own numbers. And so there's this sense of like, why can't you hit your own numbers? Or like, I used to do 75 touches a day. Why can't you do 75 touches? So it kind of goes back to what you were alluding to earlier. But do you feel like empathy is something that if you're looking to move from like an AE position to leadership, is that like a skill that you've had to work on, or did that just come naturally to you? Or
That's a really great question. To me, it did not come naturally. It did not. And I want to be, completely transparent and honest about it. It's something I really had to think about and learn through experience. And I think I probably have had some basic empathy, but not to the degree that you're referring to or alluding to. You're right. Like to me, it was like, okay, like, hey, you got to work hard and put in the dues and do that and do this. And it took me some time to really go deep into understanding, learning more about human psychology and empathy and ultimately leadership. And yeah, it's very hard. And I think there's actually a Harvard Business Review article about what makes really successful leaders, managers, and in sales. And empathy is key. It really is key because it's empathy not only for your team, but also for the customer. And also, the other thing I would say is, and by the way, Scott talked about it as well. I wrote it out again, on the Sales Leadership Podcast. I mean, it goes back to your empathy, Scott. You talked about things like, first of all, understanding that it's about them as well, not just about you and hitting the number, and stepping outside of your own world. So, Scott, you probably have it naturally. The other thing you talked about is how when you coach reps, you had, just quoting you verbatim, you talk to them not just about sales and pipeline, but about life. I don't remember if you said that, but you said about life, about their goals. And that's the tip of the spear of empathy, right? Like that was very impressive when I heard that from you, Scott. I was like, that's my guy. Like I totally align to your way of thinking. Empathy is absolutely critical. And in fact, I would say that that's a core part of the leadership style that I think for me surely works really well and has made me a better leader and a better person. And I think will work for most people extremely well because it's a function of the way human psychology and humans behave. And what I mean by that, not to be overly philosophical, is actually there's a leadership style, right? Like I interview sales managers and I ask them, what's your leadership style? And a lot of people kind of like can't really
they can't articulate it.
Can't articulate it well. Yeah. But I can tell you what my leadership style is, or one that I chose and learned and tried to, as much as possible, to perfect in myself personally, because I didn't start out being really good at it. It's called servant leadership. Servant leadership. And the word servant is actually misleading, but that's just the terminology. And the approach is that you are there to help your people, kind of be their servant, but really just kind of help your team be successful in achieving their goals, because you're a leader. You're not supposed to, remember we said earlier, you're not supposed to sell on the behalf of your sales team. You can help them. You can help, do ride-alongs, on Zoom, help them close deals, but you shouldn't be selling for them. But you should be serving them to be able to sell better. Means unblocking their path, making their way frictionless, being the in-between, perhaps the CEO and the sales team, right? Because some CEOs are a little bit like this, right? and you gotta like soften those blows for your team, and you're serving them and helping them succeed. And that leadership style, when I learned it and started practicing it and trying to work hard on improving it, became my real, I think, kind of a competitive advantage in a way. And the reason for that is people don't like to be bossed around. They don't like leaders who are jerks. They don't like managers who are meddling, interjecting, interfering, checking up and checking in, and send me the update and calling you to see what's going on, but not helping you achieve the objectives. They're not there to help you. They're just there asking a lot of questions, sucking up your time, but not adding value to you. And that's unfortunate, but there are a number of managers like that. But as a servant leader, I try to, my sense is that when I talk, I had an opportunity review and a pipeline review with a couple of my AEs. The question I typically ask them is, how can I be helpful to you? Like, what can I do to help you?
Yeah.
Like, tell me what I can do, seriously, right? That's what I want to know. And that's servant leadership.
That's the everyday question. That
I try to ask that as much as I can every day
yeah.
for my team. What can I do to help you? I want to put them in the mindset that they can come to me anytime. They should never be afraid to come to me with any issues, because yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say a reframed way of asking that question is, what blockers do you have right now today that are holding you back from adding deals to your pipeline or closing deals? And what can I do to remove those blockers for you?
I agree, totally. And look, servant leadership was not my...
For 1 second, because both you guys are different, and I think you're special leaders. I've been in those meetings before where people say, what are the blockers? And they're not going to do anything about it, you know, if you're honest about it. And, you know, it's just a formality. Hey, every Monday we have this meeting and people talks about what their plans are, what their blockers are, and nothing comes of it. So it's very different when you have a leader that's really going to take the time about it.
The question is correct, but what you're illuminating now is how hollow it rings if the leader doesn't actually follow through.
Yes.
Right? So if you are if you're in a leadership position, you can't just ask the question. When somebody says, go remove this blocker for me, you better go fucking do it.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what Alexine said about empathy, is that, again, I wasn't born with empathy, right? I wasn't like, I didn't, I didn't get come out of my mother's womb, if you will, with this empathy as part of my DNA, right? It's something I actually had to learn. It didn't come naturally to me because I was always like, work hard, get it done no matter what. So I had to really learn it and learn the empathy-driven leadership, which is this like servant leadership style. And I have still a long way to go and learn and become better. But I was convinced that it's true because some of the smartest people that I worked for and learned from drove that way. And then, funny enough, I'm going to refer to Google once again. And by the way, I don't own any Google stock. I wish I did. But there was a very interesting research done by Google some years ago. Has anybody heard of Project Oxygen? So it's very interesting. I'm going to summarize it and then move on, not to belabor it, but they had this very data-driven research, like everything else Google does, relating to whether they actually need managers at Google. They wanted to create, I think it's called like maybe holacracy, like where there's no management. It's like a completely flat organization. And they wanted to run a hypothesis test. So they, in a artificial kind of experimental environment, kind of like fired all their managers. They didn't really fire them on payroll, but they ran this kind of like hypothesis test in a virtual kind of environment. And because they wanted to test out a hypothesis by, I think it was Larry Page, the founder of Google, that managers don't matter. Like people can really like manage themselves. And it's a real thing. Google it, right? Project Oxygen. Actually, Harvard Business Review also had a case about it and they wrote about it. And it turns out that Google came to a realization that managers actually, believe it or not, do matter.
I can verify this since Google hired me to fix their fucking sales team.
But there was one interesting like quirk. They said it's not just managers, but surprise, surprise, good managers. So now the natural sort of question is, what does it mean to be a good manager? And Google identified 10 traits, right? Well, Scott, you're not going to need to guess what the first one is. Be a good coach. No surprise there, right? But the other ones are very empathy, like founded in empathy. The other one was empower your team and don't micromanage, right? So it's like leadership. It's empathy driven because you're not micromanaging, which is not very empathetic because it's like distrust to your people. The third one was express interest in your employees' well-being. How do you like that? That's like empathy right there, right? And it can't be artificial. If you're just going to do it as a matter of like a checkbox, right? Humans are very interesting. They have kind of like this third eye, psychologically speaking, like philosophically speaking, for sniffing out when somebody is being fake or disingenuous. It's typically easy to sense. So you have to really work on empathy until it's like unless you're bought in naturally, like unless you genuinely, innately believe it's important, you're never going to be able to truly fake it, and you shouldn't. And like in that case, don't be a manager, right? But if you really buy into it, which I did at some point, realizing that the way I was managing was not effective. We're talking about maybe like 2 decades ago when it started. I think empathy is everything, and Google has data to prove it. Just like I said, Project Oxygen. Anyway, so I didn't mean to belabor empathy too much, but I just think that that's so important that to being an executive and a sales leader that I wanted to cover that.
Yeah. Good. Zorian, Chris has a question. He's next in line. After Chris, we'll go to Catherine. He's got the next question.
So one of the things when you were going through the 4 main roles, when you put in biz manager, do you look at a portion of that role being managing across with your peers? Now that once you move into that VP of sales role or a CRO role, you now have a whole other set of people that you have to be at least fairly in tight connection with, right? You may not always agree on shit, but you're going to have an understanding of what they're trying to accomplish and how you're getting to the same goal, right?
Chris, and are you referring to your colleagues that are like executives on the
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, Chris, thank you. So, and you've nailed it. As part of being a business manager, one of the things is that this doesn't have anything to do directly with your sales team, but you're on the leadership management team of the organization. You have to have complete alignment, not only with the CEO, who's your boss, but also with VP of finance, VP of marketing. If the VP of marketing is if you're not a CRO, under whom the marketing group is structured, with others, VP of product, VP of engineering, CTO, etc. Absolutely, and it's your job to ensure alignment and professional communication, and that you're contributing positively to the chemistry and the balance of the team. And that's really critical, Chris. And by the way, on that note, one of the things that's absolutely critical is that chemistry. So part of being a business manager, on the leadership team, and part of being a people manager and a leader on the sales team is you absolutely have to prioritize ensuring there's chemistry on the team, which is very hard. If you have people that are disrupting or creating an imbalance of that chemistry, that's a really, really bad situation. And as a business manager within a business, if you are being a VP of sales that gives other VP of sales a bad reputation because you're kind of you have the star mentality.
You're a diva.
You're a diva, yeah. If you're doing that, you are what I consider, and I know this may sound like weird, but I think that's kind of like a business crime. Maybe not crime like to the extreme of like embezzling money or stealing or something like that, or doing something that's really really bad from an HR perspective. But I'm saying it's one of the business crimes where you are behaving so poorly that you're creating a chemical imbalance, right? That's just really bad. And that, I don't know, that chemistry to me is like one of the most important cores of running an effective organization. By the way, if anyone has read a book by the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, about it's called Trillion Dollar Coach, about Bill Campbell. He was the CEO or management coach or leadership coach to the founders of Google, actually also to Steve Jobs, I believe to Amazon's Jeff Bezos. Has anyone picked up the book Trillion Dollar Coach?
Yeah, it's great.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And Bill Campbell, I mean, that was one of the probably the best business book I read all of last year. I mean, there were others, but this one really made the most impression on me.
And they actually started a podcast after the book was released, going through some of the same stories and stuff like that, but pulling in people that were part of that experience. And
Oh, interesting. Is that Jason Rosenberg?
I'll check on it. I'll shoot it to you or something like that. But I remember because I was listening to it at the time, and then I heard about the podcast after I read the book. So
yes, so Bill Campbell had this term, and I think it was like aberrant genius, and or something like that, right? That you're a genius, but your behavior is aberrant. It's just bad, right? And what do you do with that? And it's tough. By the way, linking this back to becoming a VP of sales, again, I said that being a people manager, managing people is the hardest part of the job. It's not pipeline reviews or figuring out how to deal with objections or negotiating or closing deals. That stuff is simple, right?
Also, that's the stuff that your CEO, who knows nothing about sales, mandates you to do. It's like, oh, go do your pipeline reviews. Like, you know what I do in my pipeline review? I spend 90% of the time just having a human conversation with somebody about what's going on in life.
Yeah.
Talk about the weather, talk about sports, talk about families, talk about challenges, talk about health. And then at the very end, I'm like, oh yeah, how's the pipeline look? For like 10%. That's it. You know?
Well, it's interesting you say that.
Different way to conduct pipeline reviews and stuff. I don't want to derail the conversation. I want to get to Catherine's question, who's been waiting very patiently. She's got a question for you, Zorian. Catherine, can you take yourself off mute and ask Zorian the question?
Sure. Well, more than asking a question, I just wanted to add a little bit on that empathy portion. And I know that you said you don't want to build more into it, but I just wanted to quickly say, coming from sales, being folks that work in sales, we already have a big portion of that empathy built into our day-to-day. What happens when you go into leadership is that you have to start looking at your team as your client as well. So you're there as well to help them achieve certain goals, be better. So it's not that it's impossible to move into that role. It is challenging as the first day when you started to work. But I think the biggest challenge that we all always encounter is just the fact that we tend to forget where we're coming from. So we forget how it was that first time. Oh, if I can do the 75 calls, as Alexine said, why can't you? Well, you were there for longer. It took you certain process and certain steps to get where you are right now. So it's really just kind of scaling it down when you move into those leadership roles. And that empathy is the same one that works with your other coworkers, right? So from any of the other areas, even the CEO, if you're working directly with them, obviously, it's just being able to fully understand their goals, where they're going, what is moving them to get there, and how to better position yourself to either challenge them to be better or to fully understand how out of this world maybe that goal could be. So it's just, again, it's all about relationships. It's all about how you just connect to the other folks. I remember reading one article about moving into leadership, and really what they were pointing out was how no one is trained to detach from that day to day and be more tactical in the things that they get to do. So fully understanding where marketing is coming from, where, legal might be coming from if they're pushing back on a big business or big deal that it's coming down the pipeline. So better understanding the other parts of the organization that play a role, and not only how your personal job affects your day.
Yeah,
And that was it.
totally agree with you, Catherine. Um, totally agree. And you said a couple of things that kind of link back to what Scott was saying earlier. I liked, Scott, what you said about doing your one-on-ones and talking to people about them, just really having a genuine, authentic interest in people.
Yeah,
And
it's counterintuitive, and in terms of like what people think a pipeline review meeting is. And this is also my way of like rebelling against ignorant CEOs who try to mandate me to have these robotic meetings. Like, no, you don't understand, dude. Me hammering people about what's in their pipeline and their deals is not going to make them perform better. You know what will help them perform better? Feeling like they're working alongside somebody who gives a shit about them and who's
yeah,
willing to help remove things that are in their way. That makes people do better. So, it's a little bit subversive, but
no, I think I couldn't agree more. I think you're going back to servant leadership and empathy, and also sort of on the heels of discussing the $1 trillion coach, which I highly recommend to everyone who wants to or who has become a VP of sales or wants to become a VP of sales. If you can use that approach, what you're doing is what was referred to as Bill Campbell's superpower. It was building trust. Again, this kind of like, strangely, I don't want to sort of get into like psychology or philosophy, but we're managing humans, not robots.
so much of sales leadership is psychology.
It really truly is. And I'm not a psychologist. Yeah. My former boss, who's one of the greatest people I've ever worked for, phenomenal individual named Walter Scott. He's currently CEO of a company called Devo. And I worked for him at Acronis. He's brilliant. And he talked about, if you want to be great, study human psychology, but like with a genuine, authentic rationale, not like to use it against people, just to understand how to be a better person and how to lead people effectively. And long story short, going back to $1 trillion coach, trust was Bill Campbell's superpower. And a lot of what he did was like looking for people to, out for people. He cared about people. If anyone read that book, you remember he would start executive meetings first by really starting out with like what people did during the week and how their kids are. And it was genuine. It came from the heart. It wasn't like artificial. And I think when you start your meetings, Scott, like that, it builds trust, which is this like integrity, where people feel psychological safety with you. And by the way, psychological safety, it was something that also I believe Google, again, I like Google's insights because they're all data driven and I'm a data person. I have an applied mathematics minor. By the way, just so everyone knows, I talk about a lot about metrics.
This is the difference between Zorian and I. Zorian is applied mathematics minor, and I have a religious studies minor. It's because to show
That's
you
awesome.
how much smarter Zorian is than me.
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, when I was going through those classes, I'm like, what am I doing? Not at all. But long story short, I do love numbers. And my first job out of college was being an analyst in investment banking. So which is what you do. Like you spend 100 hours a week, literally 80 to 100 hours a week, literally. In Excel. That's what you do. So I love data and I love to be proven with data. And I try not to get paralysis by analysis, but still. In any case, Google did research. I think this one was called Project Aristotle. I think I'm starting to forget, but if anyone can Google it, if I'm wrong, tell me. And they talked about, I think there, that if you want successful teams, if you want people to perform well at work, you have to establish the psychological safety, which is done through trust building, which is done, Scott, through conversations where you actually care about people and not just kind of jump into the business issues and then move on. By the way, I keep meaning to put a kind of final touch on the leadership talking points, because I just think it's so important, and that so many people think leadership is just this like squishy, fluffy thing, but it's actually an incredibly objective, hard as a rock skill set that truly moves the needle. So, I mean, I've been very fortunate to not have in my career had many, or really a majority of my managers were great. But I've had like one particularly that I would say was just, not a very good leader, person I just did not really see myself working with, and kind of ran without turning my head back. But um, there's a leadership uh, competence totally missing when you have a manager or leader who constantly sort of psychologically beats you up, diminishes you, criticizes you, makes it very personal, and is behaving in a threatening manner. So it's very important that everyone becoming a VP of sales don't ever be like that, because you're giving everyone else a bad name. And the finishing touch I wanted to put on this is Eisenhower. I'm a huge fan of Dwight Eisenhower. He led the U.S. Army, and actually he was the supreme commander during World War II, of all the Allied forces, and he spearheaded the D-Day invasion of the Normandy beaches, which was an extremely dangerous operation. And he said that beating people over the head is not leadership; it's called assault and battery. So, like, if you have a manager that you know of that does that and runs their sales teams like that, and is very threatening and kind of beats people over the head, Eisenhower said that's not leadership, that's assault and battery.
Don't be that person anymore.
Don't ever be that. Yep.
Zorian, I've got to cut you off for a second. We've got a killer question from
Please.
Gabrielle, who's been waiting patiently. Hi,
right.
Gabrielle.
Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi, thanks, Scott. Hi, Zorian. So I was like, Scott and I were like DMing on the side over here, and one of the questions, or something that you had brought up, was talking about being a business manager, being in the role of a head of sales. So the experience that I have, like working for CROs or heads of sales, VPs of sales, is that they say, hey, what alignment means to them is being drinking buddies with like their C-suite peers. And so like Scott's like, hey, that's superficial alignment. Like, so I'm like, okay,
superficial alignment. Yeah.
Yeah. Superficial alignment. So, so the question that I have is like, for someone who hasn't been exposed to what I would say is like meaningful, effective, or productive alignment, like what does that look like? Is there a way of quantifying that? Essentially, like what is the guide that someone can follow in order to establish solid alignment cross-functionally at the C-suite or the VP level?
Gabriel, yes, that's a great question. Definitely a very good strategic kind of MBA level question. I love it. Thank you for asking that. So I actually, I have an opinion on alignment, and I agree with you and Scott that being drinking buddies is not, it's not an effective answer. It could be one of the ways of achieving that in an organization where that's a cultural norm, where the executive team, everyone likes drinking and be drinking buddies. And in that case, I think it doesn't hurt alignment to do that. But in my experience with being sort of very fortunate to work for some amazing people, I would say a true organizational alignment, first and foremost, is based on a values or principles fit. So if you're coming into the organization and you have an alignment on core values, and core values means the things that you truly value, Every organization has core values. Not every organization. Many organizations have core values. In those organizations, not all of them are true. They're just kind of writing on the wall. They're posters. But where the core values are genuine and people actually hire for the core values fit, you're then establishing a team chemistry that's from the foundation up, built correctly. People are aligned on their beliefs and principles, which are both like life type principles and work type principles. So that's number one. You have to hire correctly, which is not easy. The second thing of alignment is that a good CEO and an effective leadership team will actually establish, besides the corporate values for which they hire others, they'll establish also objectives. What is that, McKellen? Or is that tequila?
Oh, sorry. I only drink tequila. This is Dolce
okay.
Vita.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was a McKellen 18 or something, with a glance in my eye.
Sorry to distract you.
Never a distraction with a good tequila. So Gabriel, the other thing that they would need to do is establish objectives, right? And then cascade those objectives. Now this is like stepping outside of the sales leadership conversation here. But if we're going to talk about alignment, let me throw in this MBA thing of setting up corporate objectives, cascading them to different organizations that align from marketing to the corporate objective with whatever objectives are for the marketing team, and further cascading them down. The same for sales, and usually one of the corporate objectives is grow our company. So what does that mean for sales? Well, that means get us to 100 million in sales this year, et cetera, et cetera. And the key of alignment is that you have to make sure that your marketing generates enough leads for the sales team to hit their number. And there's a behind the scenes Excel spreadsheet that shows how that's going to be done. That's alignment.
What's that like? I've never experienced that before.
If you have that alignment and you have the chemistry and you have the communication and you hire for the core values, and people are very careful about maintaining that chemistry and not being criminal at work of destroying the chemistry, which happens a lot of times, then you should have that alignment and those objectives will help, right? So marketing needs to generate X number of leads this quarter for us to hit $25 million on the way to 100 million, right? So that's your corporate alignment. Again, to summarize, based on objectives, measurable objectives, whether you call them SMART goals or MBOs or OKRs, objectives and key results, you pick one. And they're all slightly different, but let's not go there. But objectives, the mission that everybody is passionate about and buys in, and having been hired and brought on the team in a way that's based on your core values matching the company's and everyone else's core values. And if you do that, you should have alignment, whether you're drinking buddies or not, right? If everyone has the same mission, is moving towards collectively the same goal, has right chemistry that nobody's putting into imbalance, has the same core values, that's alignment right there.
Yeah. One of the things, Gabrielle, excuse me, we were kind of chatting about this on the side, but Zorian, one of the things that I said to Gabrielle was, you need alignment with the CFO, for example, when it comes to the comp plan, right? Yeah. So like, I'll have all of the desire in the world to pay my sales managers and my sales reps as much money as humanly possible. I am never the blocker from them getting paid, right? So I can create this like amazing comp plan that's super lucrative, but if that destroys our financials, I'm not in alignment with the CFO.
Exactly.
I can close as many deals as humanly possible by discounting or removing contracts or how do I phrase this? Towing the line in terms of expectation setting and all of these kind of things, or selling to types of customers who are not perfectly in the ICP. What does that do? That creates a mess for customer success and customer service, right? So if I've done that, I'm not in alignment with them. If I do things like sell only annual contracts, prepaid up front, this is making customer success job easier because it's minimizing churn. It's also making the CEO's job easier, right? Because they've got a better type of customer, longer term, right? So these are tactical and very tangible things that the head of sales, or whatever the title is these days, can do to create alignment with their C-suite or VP level, colleagues, right? And I'm not going to lie to you. Like when I first got into the VP of sales role, I did not give a shit about all those things. Nobody taught me. Nobody told me those kind of things. All I was fixated on was, how can Scott hit his number? Period. By hook or by crook, right? And I realized as I got older and got more experience, like, well, I could hit my number and make this short-term commission right now, or I could do things a particular way that is more in alignment with the company's goals and all of my peers' goals. And that actually increases the valuation of the company and in turn makes it easier for us to close deals. I wish somebody was around, 15 years ago to kind of talk to me about some of that stuff. So Zorian, those are a couple like, tactical kind of examples that I was sharing with Gabrielle about this.
Totally. Gabriel, really great question. Very, do you have an MBA or are you planning on an MBA? It's a very MBA type question.
No, I just went to University of Chicago, so they had me do these kind of questions all the time.
Great school.
Well,
that's great.
It's
Very
great
smart
that you're
question.
it's great that you're already asking these questions and thinking about this stuff, because you're ahead of where I was. But the sheer fact that you're here and asking those kinds of questions, like,
Definitely executive level question. Yep.
I didn't hear the question, but from the answers, something that I've experienced is very few of the companies that I've worked at, the compensation was aligned with the actions that you want the people to take. So, I mean, it really needs to start there. If you want people and sales leaders to do the right actions, you need to start with the compensation aligning where, the sales leaders' goals align with the business goals and things like that. Because I saw people writing bad deals to make quotas and, hitting a quarter bonuses and, and our equity is vested out over 4 years or something like that instead of, incentive-based equity and things, so like, let's say we do so great, there's no way we're going to stay 4 years, at our current compensation plan or whatever to get the full equity. We're going to get hired somewhere else or quit or, whatever it might be. So it's so rare that the compensation actually matches between company goals, let alone personality or, vision or integrity and all that stuff.
Yeah. Can I take in another, just one more layer into the question around driving alignment cross-functionally? Because I think one of the things that happens is someone reads an article or they listen to a podcast and they don't ask for the context. Like how much time is being spent? Like how many conversations are being had? Like what is the kind of process
to get the alignment?
To get the alignment, right? Because for instance, all the exercises that you're doing, I'm like, all right, I know that people are doing these, but very much in silos, right? So it's like, hey, we have alignment, we have our two mom set, and it's great. But when 6 months later, I manage SDR team, so I'm right in the middle of marketing and sales. So then I see kind of everything breaking down and the cracks in the system because it's yes, we have alignment on paper, but are we actually working and stepping in alignment at the same time?
Yeah, alignment is a very hard thing because it's not something that you just have in place and it works forever.
Yeah, it's not one conversation either.
You have to constantly work on it. But look, ultimately, again, this goes back to being humans, right? Like human psychology, right? Like great relationship with your colleagues, keeping that chemistry, right? And not creating imbalance. Having alignment around core values and mission of the company. If you have that, all the other sort of sub-alignment issues, they're easier to tweak, right? So I think that's kind of key to remember. But great questions. And John, by the way, you're right about compensation. That's the key driver for, I would say coachability and compensation are the two key drivers for managing your sales team to achieve the results as sales drivers. But Gabriel was asking more about alignment with the executive team. So it's not about the compensation for sales, but it's just a little bit of a different question. By the way, one thing I know. Yeah, I was wondering if anybody is interested in discussing building winning teams because um, we talk about VP of sales, and I think that the most important job of VP of sales is recruiting great talent.
Recruiting never stops. I'm so glad you said that, Z, because that's the most underrated and least emphasized part of being a VP of sales. Your
Yeah,
ability to recruit. You know, in fact, when I have
100%.
gone to interviews and somebody's like, "What's the thing you do best?" I'm like, honestly, like I do a good job of getting super talented people to somehow decide to work for me. That's like the
I
thing that
love
I'm good
that.
at.
I love that.
That's it. That's it. You know.
I would like to say that it's similar with me, but I would phrase it for myself as I'm very fortunate that despite everything else, I've been honored to have incredible people join me.
Yeah.
Despite
But
everything else.
it's a skill set though. I want to move to Matt Toth, who's been waiting patiently. Matt's got a good question. I think some of it is around building successful teams as well.
Yeah, it is
You
definitely.
there, Matt? Yeah.
Yeah, I got two quick questions. So one is just to finish your scorecard. I think I only got number one, which was personal traits and characteristics. What were the next two on the scorecard?
Yeah, so the scorecard, there's concept of personal traits and characteristics. The second one is work competencies and capabilities. And the third is your specific selling skills. Let me give you some examples. Personal traits and characteristics is what you should really, that DNA is what you should really hire for. There's a great book called Sales Drive, um, and written by psychologists who helped companies. When I was at Veeam Software, incredible company, we took it from 20 million to 100 million in 3 years. It started in the same year as HubSpot, but last year Veeam did more in revenue than HubSpot, and Veeam was private. They just sold this year for 5 billion. I learned a ton there, and this psychologist helped us recruit in sales. And he has the task called the sales drive, and he said the drive, ambition, desire to win, healthy competitiveness, healthy, is key, and that's a key trait and characteristic. It's not a sales skill, and it's not a work competency or capability. So drive, work ethic, conscientiousness, dedication, getting the job done. Also like optimism, grit, resilience, coachability factor, intelligence, reasoning skills, empathy. Those are first bucket. That's personal traits. You hire for that. Work competency, prior success, time management, conflict management, curiosity. Those are the second bucket, work competency and capabilities. The third bucket, which is extremely teachable, are selling skills, prospecting, sales call planning, providing insights to the prospect, discovery, exploration, qualification, pain funnel, objection handling, deal execution, closing. Those are all selling skills, and those are all very teachable. So hire for the traits and train for the skills. Now, I want to say a couple more things. So yes, Scott, recruiting, and you should spend as a sales VP like 20% of your time recruiting, building a team. But building a winning team is really hard. In fact, I spent a lot of time actually reading books by sports coaches, from Phil Jackson.
Yeah, same.
Right?
John Wooden, Phil Jackson, all of that stuff.
Obviously, read a lot of stuff about Bill Belichick. Huge fan of Bill Belichick, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I do apologize to anyone who hates him.
Yeah, we could skip that one. We could skip Bill Belichick.
We're not going to. But I even read the book by Tom Coughlin, the former Giants coach who beat us into Super Bowls. Because I don't care about who beat us. I don't get emotional about that kind of stuff. I do care to learn from a coach like that. He has a great book like Earn the Right to Win or something like that. Earn the Right to Win. Great book. Bill Walsh, The Score Takes Care of Itself. And there's another Bill Walsh book. I forgot the name. You can't really buy it, and it costs like $300 on Amazon. But I did borrow it from a friend, and that's a book that Bill Belichick said was the one most important book in his library. And he has what's known as the biggest football coaching library on planet Earth. He donated it. It was from his dad's library, etc. But let's talk about Bill Belichick, and I'll tell you why. This is not about football. And I'm aspiring to be a student of Bill Belichick, not only because I'm a fan of the Patriots and of his, ability to win games, but he's a genius in a couple of areas, but in one particular is building winning teams. So let's talk about the following. Why is it that he gets to recruit people? So, and I'm not only going to talk about Tom Brady, because Tom Brady is the easy one, right? So if anybody remembers, or you looked at Tom Brady's scouting report, they said that he had poor build, skinny, legs great physical stature, lacks mobility, lacks a really strong arm. That's literally from his scouting report, and gets knocked down easily. Although that last one could be somewhat true in his performance, even in the 6 Super Bowls he won. So the question is not why and how Bill Belichick was able to get Tom Brady and turn and transform him into the best quarterback in history. And again, we can debate it, but let's go do that at another time. Let's talk about Edelman, right? So Julian Edelman, and again, I'm not trying to geek out on football, but this is very important. That has real core lessons for recruiting amazing team. And you'll see why in just a minute. I'll peel the onion. So if you all remember the Patriots versus Atlanta Super Bowl, which was, there was a poll and they said it was ultimately, like in retrospect, the #1 rated Super Bowl of all time, right, by all the viewers. And you may remember, many of you probably don't, is that Julian Edelman had this kind of the impossible catch in the Super Bowl. And there was the biggest kind of comeback in history. And he had this completely impossible, improbable catch. But here's the deal. Julian Edelman had the following in his scouting report. They said that he's the gimmick prospect who lacks a true position, right? That's literally what they said. They said lacks size and speed, may lack a true position at the next level. Nobody wanted Julian Edelman. Nobody even wanted Tom Brady. Well, not nobody. I mean, he was in the 6th round, 199th pick. Pretty much nobody. So what is going on here? And by the way, these are just 2 examples of very many. I mean, I can go on and talk about Nate Abner, Matthew Slater, Chris Hogan. By the way, nobody wanted Randy Moss, right? Like when he was, I think he was at the Raiders, right? They wanted to get rid of him and trade him out. What about Cam Newton, who's our new quarterback after Tom Brady left? Why am I mentioning all these names? Zero reason that I'm mentioning them for the purposes of discussing football, but I am saying the following. It's not 1 or 2. It's a consistent track record of getting people that everybody else ignores, doesn't want, players that are undervalued, that others have explicitly and verbatim said to be poor players, gimmick players, too slow, not a strong arm. So how does Belichick do it? So it's actually very interesting. He will one day hopefully write a book and give us all the details, right? But he has a very interesting approach of having a mindset that is completely different than other coaches. He comes into the picture with a mindset of thinking outside the box, which is the first start, right? He doesn't go by the kind of old school criteria that all the other coaches think about, right? Like when people say he plays chess when everyone else plays checker. Let me give you parallels to sales management. People getting recruited for industry experience. I just think that's silly, right? Like many years ago, I was very interested in a security company. And the CEO there said that I don't have the security space, cybersecurity experience. So he wasn't interested in talking to me. For years later, I just had interest in how they're doing, and they went through 3 sales VPs who all kind of didn't do great. I'm not saying I would do great. I don't know. But that was the primary reason he didn't even want to talk to me and interview me. That's fine. whatever. Good luck. But that's not how Bill Belichick thinks about recruiting. He doesn't look at these old school criteria. Um, People hire a lot for like skills, whereas they should be hiring for traits. People don't think outside the box. They don't think about undervalued. So I love undervalued as a factor. Let me give you examples. When I was in Inside Squared, so we had this sales rep named Joe Caprio. Joe Caprio, some of you may know, he ran sales as VP of sales at Chorus.ai. He's right now the co-founder and head of sales, CRO of a company called Reprise. They sell to sales. Look him up. He, before Inside Squared, he had a hard time breaking into SaaS, into software sales, because he sold like to restaurants, he sold laundry services, like washing the uniform of the chef at the restaurant or something like that. He was our best sales rep, or one of the best. He's fantastic. He's a great sales leader. He was undervalued. Here's another person, Joe Knight. I hired him some years ago. He couldn't break into sales. Scott, you're going to love this. He was a defensive coordinator for Framingham State University here in the Boston area. Nobody wanted him because he had no sales experience. Here's the deal. He really understood coachability because he was a coach. He understood what it's like when you're being coached on sales tactics, that you need to like really listen, take the feedback, go back and practice, rehearse. And for that reason, he was very smart, I could tell. For that reason, I brought him on board. He became my best sales rep. A lot of times when I interview, I want to find out how, like I talked earlier about, magical questions. There's no such thing, but there are some questions that have worked really well for me. They're not like 100% predictors, but I do ask people, what sales books or what sales blogs or what sales experts do you follow or read or etc. or podcasts that you listen? When a lot of people who tell me they don't do any of those, they don't read sales books, etc., they don't follow anyone, it's kind of a negative sign. But there's
definitely
one
a negative sign.
Negative sign. It's like, if you really want to be in sales, why are you not studying to be like?
Yeah, because you're looking for a little bit of the underdog mentality, and you're looking for somebody who's a bit of a student of the game.
Yeah.
And who's spending their free time investing in themselves.
Yes.
Right. And that's what you're kind of looking for. It's not necessarily that I'm looking for somebody who's super smart about everything. It's
no.
I want to see if this person spends their free time playing video games all day or learning and investing in themselves. Right.
Or even not like all the time, but like some of the time. Like, for example, if you want to be in sales, you're telling me you really want this job, then why do you even know what it's like if you haven't like really read any blog posts or talked to any sales reps or read any books? Like, why is that? Why would you not want to do it if this is the career you want to pursue? I don't get it. But there's one positive signal, is when they come out of that meeting and they take down the notes of what books they like. The person who asked me, okay, well, I haven't read any, but can you suggest something? So Joe Knight, for example, who couldn't get a job in sales, he like asked me like, okay, well, no, I haven't, but what would you recommend? And I gave him a couple of books. And like a few like days later, he's like, I already got these books and I already like am almost finished with one of them. I'm like, okay, wow.
Yeah, because that shows initiative, right?
Big time.
Coachability. Shows coachability, right?
Totally.
I mean, what if somebody asks for help and you suggest something for them to do and they don't do it, that's the fastest way to never get my help ever again.
Exactly. So long story short is like, I like recruiting undervalued players. Like Joe couldn't get into SaaS. Joe Caprio, sold laundry services, couldn't do it. And yet these both are like some of the best. So Joe Knight is at a company called Fuse, which had huge layoffs a year ago. He was one of the select few salespeople across. I think they had like a sales team of 100, maybe like a really large sales team. He's one of the select few, like maybe like in the 5 to 10 people that was asked to stay. After a few years, he worked for me, and after a few years in sales. So the point is that recruiting a great team, you have to think outside the box, have that mindset like Bill Belichick. Look for undervalued players. Why? There's psychology. They got a chip on their shoulder. They really want it, right? And guess what? One of the most important factors is that seems very fluffy and squishy that a lot of people ignore. But that passion is so important. And when I have somebody come in for an interview and they say, I really want to be here. I really want to work for you, want to work for this company. I love your product or the industry or the customer profile you sell to, or I love sales. I really want to break into sales. Unfortunately, a lot of sales executives look at that and like, yeah, but they don't have any experience. They were not in the industry. And I think that's a giant mistake because that person has a far higher probability of achieving the results you want because they're just that hungry. Why is it that you hear sort of the flip, sort of the other side of that coin where people tell you, do what you're passionate about, right? Because that passion is that psychology. It's a real force, right? When you enjoy something that you do. So if you read Warren Buffett, I'm a huge fan of Warren Buffett. He talks about the one most important thing you can sort of guarantee that you'll be successful in your career, that if you have, you'll be almost guaranteed to be successful, is that do something you're passionate about. It's a very powerful force. So the Edelmans and the Bradys of the world, they had a ton of passion. They had a chip on their shoulder. They didn't, others didn't want them. So they ended up doing whatever the heck it takes to be successful. But there's one last piece of that conversation with 2 minutes left or to the end of this, is that it's not just about recruiting great people. The onus is on the VP of sales to create that system that, by the way, Belichick did create and put Tom Brady into a system which worked really well. It systematized and operationalized football. But you have to be responsible for the other half. You're bringing passionate people. You have to create a system, a sales process, training, coaching, and invest your best into that to create that foundation on top of which a great team will be successful. Because what a lot of sales VPs, I think, unfortunately miss is that they're just hiring, again, for the industry experience or based on some question, they think that magically is going to sniff out great talent without saying, you know what, the candidate is just half, right? Half of the equation. I am the other half, that I have to be responsible for the right system and create the environment and bring them in with the right chemistry so that it doesn't create that imbalance in the system that actually works. So building a winning team is not just hiring and recruiting great people. It's also your job as the VP of sales to create a fantastic ecosystem, environment, system, and team where everything fits in place and works really well to achieve results.
That's great.
And that's 10 o'clock on my time.
Yeah, man. Right on the
time.
button, like you stopped exactly at the deadline. It's my own deadline where I got to go put my kids to bed. And go
I just want Ephraim to go to sleep at like 3 or 4 in the morning. That's
he's
really
about
it.
to wake. He's probably gonna wake up soon.
Yeah.
I'm still awake. I'm listening.
Well, I
Well
hope
done,
that
my
was
friend.
useful for you and worth staying up this late.
Yeah, there's some good stuff there. We had some good questions from the group. I've got the recording. I'll share the recording probably tomorrow with everybody, and you can rewatch it, share it around with some of your team members, things like that. It's fine with me. And Zorian, big thanks, man. Appreciate it. We'll share the session with you as well, and use it however you want, man. Enjoyed the conversation.
Scott, thank you so much. Really enjoyed hanging with you again. I love it. Thanks to everyone, and enjoyed meeting you all here.
Yeah, and we got a couple updates in 2 weeks. Tequila Tuesday 6. My good friend and surf and sales partner Richard Harris will be here, talking specifically about how to juggle multiple offers, as well as you're going to talk a little bit about some of the mental health challenges that we're all going through, whether we all realize it or not. We're dealing with crisis and trauma right now, all of us. So we're going to get into some of that. And then in October, I've got a real life psychologist, therapist coming in to talk to all of us about normalizing mental health and coping and de-stressing in times like this. And later on in October, I've got Rachel May, who some of you may know. She works for Keenan Sales Training Company. She's going to talk about creating a culture of learning and development. And then I have decided I'm going to give away my playbook. So I have, this is my 12th month here as a solopreneur. My September, when September ends, it'll be my 12th month. I'm going to just miss having $1 million business with no employees, just by myself. I don't say that to brag in any way, shape, or form. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give away my playbook. I want to teach you and talk to you all about all the things that I've done to put this all together, all the different streams and whatnot. And I'm just going to give it away to all of you, and you can steal all that shit. I've been trying to think like, what's a good way for me to deliver my first like real training, and I think that this is a good thing that I could do for y'all. So those are some of the things coming up soon. So thank you everybody for joining us. Z, thank you very much, buddy.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again soon.
Night,
Everybody have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. Danny, let me see the tequila cup one more time, dude. Yeah, baby.
My wife brought it. Yeah, she knew what was happening Tuesday night, and the bottle of Toro.
Wow, what is that? I've never had this.
It's a brown tequila. I'm a bourbon guy.
No, Danny, it's not a brown tequila, dude. It's an añejo or reposado or blanco. Let's get the terminology right here. Words matter.
That goes to show that I'm a bourbon guy. Nothing else.
The best part is this will be the very last part of the recording, Danny.
Oh, you're still recording. Beautiful.
I am. Adios.